Greetings. So, when it comes to the whole salmon issue on the Columbia, there's a predator animal that nobody ever brings up, and there's a lot of other issues along with this because you tear out the dams. What about the farmers in the water? So, hey, welcome. Fake accounts, AI chatbots, and maybe some organics that are actually here because God knows YouTube's probably mostly bots at this point. Freedom Phil, like and subscribe. Let's get into it. Look, everybody wants to save the salmon. It's not like the people on the other side are like, screw the fish, but let's be real about it. You've got to make some serious decisions on this because those farmers and water, that's a pretty big thing. You want to see what, Eastern Washington, Idaho, and Oregon would look like without those dams. Go take a look at go on Google Maps, and take a good look at what most of I-80 through Wyoming looks like. It's pretty much a desolate wasteland that's good for basically ranching. That's it. Ranching and oil extraction. And that's basically what you'd have in all that region if not for the dams and the irrigation canals. So all that food that's grown, because they've shown that we could grow most of the food for America just in those three states. That's how plentiful and wonderful that is out there. What are we going to do to replace that water? And the best idea I can think of is building small dams like the way the beavers do it, so it's not something fish can't get by, up the creeks, up the rivers, to slow down the water. Maybe even take some of the water and send it out to areas to recharge lakes where it's designed to soak in, like what you see in the Midwest and other places where the water puddles up in certain areas and then it soaks in and recharges the wells. I mean, because let's be honest, back in the day, it made sense to have dams and canals. Canals are good too, but like some places, they're taking out the canals and replacing them with pipes. And ironically, because of the height up here at one reservoir and the water going down that way, it actually causes its own pressure. So you don't actually have to pay for the electricity. That's literally where I'm at right now. That's what happened with the pipes they did around here. And it's great. That is absolutely great. And we need a plan before we go and destroy everything for a touchy-feely reason. And also something I want to point out is, what about all the rivers that are not the Columbia and not where dams are, that they spend almost no money on trying to restock those rivers? There should be hatcheries, more hatcheries, which is contentious over where I grew up, over on the Western Washington, the Olympic Northwest. It's contentious because you'll have the salmon hippies that'll say, well, the salmon need to go out there and select their own mates. I agree, in a perfect world, that'd be great. But that's not what we live in. If not for some of those hatcheries back in the day, there would be no salmon in a lot of those rivers. And, the First Nations people, some of them do actually pay some of their government given money to running hatcheries. So basically, they're basically farmers in that respect. They're putting fish into the rivers. The fish come back, and they bring out their gill nets. And my contentious issue on the natives on that is that so you're trying to tell me this is cultural, yet you're using nylon gill nets, like stretched all the way across the river. I remember this as a child. This happened every year. And one thing that always kind of bugged the hell out of me, like, yeah, I'm a European white Caucasian thing, and basically you're American mud. And somehow, when I know how to go out and forage and harvest and live off the land, I'm not part of the land, even though I grew up there. But these other people, they're sacred and blah, blah, blah. And they don't even eat as much friggin' food off the land as I do. But, they have the right to take 50% of it because of the Bollinger Agreement. Now, what I want to get at with that is that we're in a modern era. And I can understand catching some fish for spiritual reasons. But you telling me in an era where there's all sorts of jobs all over the country and the world, like, hey man, if you're broke in the middle of nowhere, go drive truck, go get in a truck, make some money, come back, pay cash for a piece of property, outright own something. Natives have the casinos, they have all these other things, tax-free casinos. At least that's the way it used to be. They didn't have to pay taxes for all the money they made there. And a lot of this was all subsidized by the government when they were building the crap anyways. And so it's not like you really need to rely off living off these fish. In fact, wild thought here, you'd probably be better off not selling the fish commercially and then having sports fishermen and then you controlling those interests. Like you going out there and having the charter boats, you having the guides along the rivers. That'd be a thriving industry. And then having golf courses and resorts, once again, right next to your casino. Wild thought there. While the women are, pissing away some money at the casinos and the spa, Maybe the guys are out doing some golf and catching some fish. Everybody has a good time, and then you show the cultural ways of your people, have a museum and all that. And as far as actually producing commercial levels of fish, not just natives, but other farmers, how about aquaculture? And I'm not talking about net pens out there, because there's been a lot of problems with sea lice and other things. You could actually build tanks. It's been done. It's been done in Europe. It's been done all over the world, where you can build big tanks and raise Atlantic salmon in there. And bada bing, bada boom. You have farming culture, you have sports fishing, you have all these things. Along with that, wild thought here, maybe start producing more hatcheries so you have more rivers. So it isn't just the natives that are, benefiting from this. It would be these small towns. Like if you go out to Clawlin Bay and CQ, the legend was back in the day, and I know this because one of my employers back in the day, he used to tell me as a kid, it was faster to walk between these two small towns. They're basically right next to each other, than it was to drive. And the reason was, it was just pickup truck, boat, RV, boat, everything, vehicles, just trying to get down to the boat launch so they could go fishing for salmon or halibut or something. That could be the way it is again someday, if we just started treating this seriously. But instead, what we have is a zero growth style movement coming from a lot of the so-called environmentalists, where they're like, no, hatcheries are bad. Fishing is bad. Like, they treat people as if we're not part of it. Now let's get into those predator animals. Okay, like, look, I don't have a bone to pick with these animals, but if we're being honest about it, like, one thing that we really changed was the amount of humans that were around here when the Spanish and the pioneers showed up. Because inadvertently, the Spanish brought over a disease that had never been seen here, which for us was probably like a cold, but for the First Nations people was a goddamn plague. Now, the pioneers probably brought it up accidentally as well. And what happened was, what was it, 90 to 95% of the First Nations people, and we're talking multiple millions of people nationwide, died of these diseases. So when the pioneers came here, first they probably saw some wild things, probably pretty cool. And then when the settlers came, they found like longhouses. Longhouses was these big log houses up in the Northwest. They'd have whole families that lived in them, full of bones. Like, everybody died, and the few people that survived this plague, basically, what was it, smallpox or something like that, or some other crazy shit. Basically, there was only remnants of that. So not only did it make the native people easy to be conquered, controlled, people thought God did this for God. That's how stupid people were back. Well, okay, I shouldn't say stupid. They were ignorant. They just didn't know of germ theory and all this other crap. Now, what would change if you had a large predator creature like humans that were probably, you're talking about, some of these people hunted whales and shit. They're out there taking out whales. Go up to the Macaw tribe, Nia Bay. That's what they did. The Macaw tribe stretched all the way up into Canada, if I remember right. Pretty hardcore people, by the way. So what do you think happens when you lose a large number of people that were probably harvesting whatever was around? Whether it was salmon, plant life, deer, maybe seals and sea lions. Wild thought there, right? Because you had millions of people around. We just don't recognize that because it's been gone. In fact, you talk to some of the old natives, and they'll say, well, part of the fire problem you have in the Great Northwest or anywhere is because back in the day we used to manage the land. We understood we would set fires here and there, and that would clear out the brush and the bugs and the dead trees. And then what would happen is that there would be grasslands for deer hunting and whatnot, elk, deer, and other animals. Well, in the same way, if you have seals and sea lions around and nobody's hunting them for ages, and there's also, here's the other thing, there was massive overhunting of seals and sea lions way back in the day because of the fur trade and all this other crap. So now we have this don't touch, don't manage anything attitude towards these seals and sea lions. Well, one of the other problems is the overfishing on all these lakes, rivers, and streams, and mostly the ocean. Let's be real about it. And it went from being salmon to, sardines, herring, smelt, and whatever small food fish. Now, these food fish are the food fish for the salmon, but they're also the food fish for the otters, the seals, and the sea lions. So as their numbers have declined, probably along with climate change and other things, the seals are moving up north. The sea lions are moving up north. And so they find a food source that conveniently, and if you think animals are dumb, look, they're not on par with us, but they probably have some sort of like memory, long-term memory, where they're like, hey, guess what? There's food up there. And maybe it's just like they can sense it in the river. Hey, all these fish are going up here. Let's go have the buffet. If you really wanted to raise the salmon numbers, and maybe someday when we have the water issue figured out for the farmers and you get rid of the dams, the first thing you should probably do is take out some of the female sea lions. And I know a lot of people, why the females? I know a lot of people get touchy-feely about this, but it's the same problem you run into with the deer. You say the deer are overpopulating, it's causing car accidents and all this, but all you allow people to hunt, for the most part, are the male deer. Well, it only takes one male to breed how many female deer, and that's exactly how it works with friggin' seals and sea lions. There's something called the Beachmaster. Look it up. It's pretty funny. If you ever see, well, actually, Futurama did a video about that too. But it's true. The Beachmaster is the strongest seal, sea lion, walrus, or whatever. And they bash against each other, and the strongest does all the breeding. And he breeds with all the females. And the limiting factor on how many offspring you're going to have in those populations is how many female animals you have there. Now, I'm not saying you wholesale go sue and slaughter them all. No. But if you took out how many breeding females and probably some of the older males and whatnot, when I say old, I'm talking like on death's door. I'm not talking about the healthy, strong ones. If you took out some of those animals, think of the tens of thousands of salmon you would save every year. Now, people say, well, should we be playing God? We played God the whole way along through this. We've been doing that since we started agriculture, since we stopped being hunter-gatherers. I mean, when the Spanish came over across the water and the pioneers came over and the diseases were introduced over here, that's like playing God right there on accident. Basically, the people that probably most likely hunted those animals and kept them in check ceased to be a thing. The cultural ways of their people that, worked for thousands of years around here. And mind you have to ask the question, what's better? What they had way back in the day, and everyone's like, yeah, when you maybe died at 30 years old, maybe you made it to 50 and you're an old person, or we are now. We can acknowledge the mistakes we've made along the way and make adaptations and changes to actually better things. But if we keep on running this thing where it's like we try to act like we're not part of it, then I think we're just going to, we're going to sort of fix things, but probably fuck them up even worse. And so I'm not, like I said, and this is also something with the Canadian geese issue. Once upon a time, Canadian geese did have an issue of numbers, but now they're everywhere. They're pooping on every single damn city park you have. Are you going to manage this problem? If you're not willing to do that, if you're for touchy-feely reasons, then please just get the fuck out of the way. There's solutions to all these problems that we can do. But if you're just tearing out these dams because you live in Seattle or Portland and you're not going to be, your food prices are going to go up, and there's going to be some issues, but you're not really affected by this. You're just not. And okay, just as a closing thought, as far as the seal and sea lion issue, back in the day, they had this very same issue on the Willamette River. And they went through and they wholesale slaughtered the shit out of all the seals and sea lions. And then they had a rebound of the salmon. The salmon came back extremely populated. Now, maybe it had to do with the food sources out in the water and the ocean were really good for a year or two. Or maybe it had something to do with more spawning fish equals more fish spawning. Wild thought there. And then you could even put this along the lines of not just the salmon doing it themselves, but people taking these fish and raising them in hatcheries. So I do want to see the fish come back all the way up the Salmon River and up the tributaries of the Snake and whatnot. Like maybe if they go up to Henry's Fork and whatnot, I'd love to see that. But not at the cost of thousands of farmers, food sources, not at that cost. There's a lot of places we can fix first. And unless we're willing to acknowledge and take care of those water issue problems, then all we're doing is a giant fucking political air fap for touchy-feely reasons. And I just think that's a pretty pathetic reason to destroy everything. But anyhow, this is Freedom Phil. Like and subscribe. I've said a lot about this, and I'm not kidding. I really think that a lot of what we hear, a lot of the chat, if you get comments on this crap, how much of it's just chat bots, like AI chat bots. But who knows? Maybe that's the future of interactions. Y'all have a great day. Take it easy.